Hello everyone, welcome back to CRE N More, where we talk about commercial real estate and more, episode number 9. Together with my trusted co-host Simon Yeh from SYH Solution, the loan broker, we have the pleasure of inviting Adrian Crandall from Corinthian Title and Jennifer Underwood from Corner Escrow Company.
Hi guys, welcome.
Hi guys, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Hi. Okay.
Hi guys, this is Simon. I'm his co-host. And then Adrian, tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Adrian Crandall. I'm with Corinthian Title Company. We're primarily in Southern California with headquarters in San Diego. We work with multiple underwriters, so you have flexibility in the title insurance company that you go with. And we've got a little bit of flexibility on pricing as a result. I've been doing title insurance for about 25 years. I started working inside the office and eventually got a chance to get out into the field and work with you realtors and lenders and mix it up a little bit. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about what's the difference between title insurance, fire insurance, home warranty? Because everything sounds like insurance.
Great question. Yeah, isn't that the truth? And title insurance is a little bit of a different breed. And the reason I say that, so first of all, title insurance, it protects your ownership in the property and also makes sure that if there's any liens or debts that were on the property prior to you buying, those are going to be wiped out so that you don't have to take responsibility over those after you purchase the property. So the interesting thing about it is, it is insurance, although we're not taking a monthly premium like a lot of insurance types do. It's a one-time cost that you pay when the transaction closes or when you purchase the property or sell the property. And that covers you for the length of time that you own the property. So other insurances like home insurance, homeowners insurance, they protect things that it protects like fire insurance would protect against fire in the home, and homeowners insurance protects against things happening with the home, where title insurance actually protects your ownership and makes sure that should anybody make a claim or say that they have ownership of your property, your title insurance policy will protect you against that claim.
In fire insurance, often we are talking about insuring after we acquire the property. Is the title insurance insuring whatever happens during the ownership or prior to the ownership before you transition?
So it actually ensures that whatever happened prior to your ownership is clear, it's done, right? So it ensures everything prior to your ownership, but it actually insures you from the time that you own until the time that you sell, right? So if there's a claim that comes up 20 years from now that happened as a result of something that was prior to your ownership on the property, then we're going to handle that for you still. So it ensures you're covered for the length of your ownership.
And whether you are purchasing, refinancing, whether you have a loan on the property that you're looking to purchase, with or without a loan, we need escrow company. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Jennifer Underwood, our trusted partner. And please tell us a little bit about how you get into escrow, and then tell us more about your company.
All right. Thank you, Simon. So my name's Jennifer Underwood. I work with Corner Escrow. I've been with Corner Escrow for 8 years. We are an independent escrow company that has several branches within Southern California. We're licensed for the whole state of California. I've been doing escrow almost 22 years, and I just kind of got into it by chance. A friend of mine was in escrow, and there was a door of opportunity, and I just fell in love with it. So here I am 21 years later, and escrow is a disinterested, neutral third party in a real estate transaction. We don't take any sides. We are neutral and just help that all parties stay in agreement. We are master administrators of several facets that go on during the sale process.
Thank you. And Tom, did you realize that whether or not it's commercial or residential transactions, we need both of these two awesome professionals, Adrian and Jennifer. And as a matter of fact, I have a deal going on that both of them are serving us right now. Tom, what's your question for both of them?
Yes, actually, many buyers, they are confused. Now they send out an offer, the seller accepted it, regardless of whether if it's a residential or commercial. What's next? Who do we contact? And what's the important? Because there's multiple dots to this loop, and how to connect the dots together. Jennifer.
Okay. Yeah. So it can be very overwhelming for buyers, particularly if it's their first time through this. They've signed the contract and they're like, okay, we're excited, but we're terrified. And now what? So escrow gets the accepted offer. Once the buyer and seller agree to the terms of the sale, we open escrow and the buyer send in their deposit. Then they get a rash of emails and requests for signing documents. Part of the escrow process is then we work in conjunction and team up with the title company. The title does a search of the property because they're going to issue title insurance at closing, like Adrian was explaining. And they say what is currently on the property. Is there any liens, any mortgages, or anything that's going on that we need to be concerned about to take care of as part of the escrow process? If the buyer's getting a loan, they're going to have a lot of requests to their lender. So as much as it's very stressful, we try to step in to help alleviate any of their stress and answer questions. And usually most residential escrows are about 30 days. Commercial can be more, maybe about 60 days. Sometimes it's longer, but an escrow can take 2 weeks to a year if it needs to be. So there's no set timeline on that. But we always just try to be there. And I know Adrian too, for any questions that come up, try to reassure clients as they're going through this process.
Yeah, that's great. As Jennifer kind of pointed out, escrow and title works hand in hand a lot throughout the transaction. Oftentimes we'll get a request to open title and we'll run what's called a preliminary title report. And in that report, like she mentioned, it'll explain all of the things that were recorded on the property that are still of record, that are still affecting the property. And what I mean by that is any liens, any judgments that might be against the owner or against the property, anything that's going to affect the future ability to use that property, we want to make sure is cleared so that the new buyer takes over a free and clear property, aside from whatever loans or whatever that they may incur. So we'll disclose all of the open liens, encumbrances. We'll also disclose taxes and legal descriptions for the property and things like that, so that Jennifer can then start fielding some of these items down and getting payoff demands and really, figuring out how to remove those items throughout the course of the escrow so that once we actually close, we've got a clean slate on that property.
So during the preliminary title report, when things are found, is this something to be scared of, or this is actually, it's good to see them?
Absolutely. So I always recommend we get the preliminary title report as early as possible, because I believe in being proactive. I don't think you should be scared, right? I think there sometimes are things that are scary on there, but we can always work to resolve issues. But if there's something on there that doesn't belong, or if there's something on there that is going to be an issue down the road, you definitely want to get to it sooner rather than later. You don't want to have to deal with it at the 11th hour right before you're ready to close, right? So as far as being scared of items, I think if you take a proactive approach, you don't have to be scared about what's on the prelim.
Oh, I think that knowledge is power. And when we get the title report, then it gives us that picture of what's on the property. And then it gives us a clear directives on work that we need to do to make sure that we're getting everything cleared up. And then also disclosures for any easements and stuff that escrow doesn't have to clear from the property. But then the buyer has a chance to look at those too, to educate themselves. So yeah, I say knowledge is power when it comes to doing that preliminary title report and getting it early So if there's an IRS lien or something that's going to take a long time to get cleared, then sometimes we can start working on it in advance before a buyer's realized in some cases. So that way we can aim for a smooth transaction.
So
Absolutely.
Seeing them actually gives you the opportunity to clear them. Without seeing them, that's actually what's dangerous then.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's waiting until the last minute, right? It's not being proactive. It's waiting until it's too late to clear something before you want to close.
What are some of the reasons that will cause liens or cloud on the title that out there?
So some reasons would include if multiple people are on title and one of them doesn't want to cooperate, that can be an issue, that it can be a challenge. Or if one of them maybe is not around, you're not able to locate them, or they're out of the country, or for some reason they're not able to sign. That can sometimes be a little bit of an issue. If someone has been put on title after title insurance was issued, so it's real easy to record a grant deed and add someone to the title of your property. But the scary thing about that is if you do that yourself through the county, everything that is against that person's name that you're adding to the title of your property then attaches to your property as well, right? So that's when that becomes a big issue, is say, maybe you have a family member or a son or daughter that you want to put on property, and if that person is not paying their insurance, their IRS taxes, or they're not paying their state taxes, those liens could then show up and apply to your property. So you want to be real careful of that. So those are some of the things that can come up. Again, child support liens are another issue that I've seen come up in the past. I mentioned state and IRS liens. Judgments, so if there's any kind of court action or something like that happens, if there's a dispute and it happens to involve the property, then that court action or the judgment could then record against the property and then create an issue during the transaction. So really it's anything that is an issue, right? So because your home or your property is often your highest investment or your biggest investment, that's also where a lot of your debt gets placed. So when you sell that asset, we want to make sure, or the government wants to be sure, that you're paying off all the debt that is attached to that property as well.
Right, especially the lenders want to see it's a clean title, right? And on the other hand, the other type of liens that we've seen is mechanic liens, right? If someone comes to do a job for you and you don't pay them, and they might, issue a mechanic lien on it. And a lot of the other type of liens that we may, or things that shows up on preliminary title, maybe someone with the same spelling of your name, but it may not be you, right? But
right,
it's
absolutely.
A county record or in someone's record, and then it gets put on the property because they couldn't find a person, and then it turns out, feel safe now. It's not me, right?
That's a great point. We actually asked for something called it's called a statement of information, and that statement of information allows us to pick up issues like that, right? It's all the information about you. It's your social security number, it's your identification, your state ID, it's past residences, it's anything that we can use to identify you, and then match up with documents or things that are recorded in public record, and see if they actually match with your name specifically or just someone else with a similar name. So,
and that's a form that Jennifer will send out, because I know whenever we open a new escrow, she will send out a statement of information. It asks you the past 10 years where you live, what job you've worked, and then where were you born, and when did you enter California, something like that, right?
And all of that information just helps us to figure out which documents, which items are actually applicable to our owner or our buyer, or someone else with a similar name.
Mm-hmm.
So Jennifer, having so many escrows out there, what makes Corner Escrow and what you do set you apart from others?
So the majority of escrow officers do residential escrows, or sometimes they subscribe themselves to doing commercial and just one or the other. And over the years that I've been in escrow, I've taken classes and I've learned from other professionals in my industry, not only residential, but commercial. And then I've learned mobile homes that are on leased land. I can also do them on regular land, and then also business escrows for the sale of a business, being a tanning salon, a restaurant, a vape shop, any kind of business that is out there, to do escrow. And so I'm a bit unique in my skill set with being able to cross over to all of those different types of escrows. So I actually get a lot of referrals from my company. When they have mobile homes or businesses come in, they pass them along to me. So it feels really good to know all those different kinds, have studied them, and really just, subscribe myself to trying to perfect my craft. And so that's what sets me apart from other escrow.
Residential, commercial, land, business opportunity.
And mobile homes. Those are quite different. Can you tell us a little bit about difference between residential and commercial in title? I mean, how do you do them differently?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say that the big difference between residential and commercial, and Jennifer, you can tell me if you agree or not, I would say it's just complexity, right? Most residential transactions tend to be a little bit more straightforward, a little bit easier to close, while commercial transactions, there's a lot more moving pieces that can cause hiccups in the transaction. So it just takes a little bit more expertise, I would say, to handle those commercial transactions and to be able to handle all of the moving pieces. And that's why it's fantastic to be able to work with someone like Jennifer, who understands all of these different facets of the business, right? It makes a big difference to have that key person in place so that you can really facilitate the transaction in a clean way.
I see. And both Jennifer and Adrian, I have a question. I'm always curious. Does escrow and title view the type of property the same way as the bank does? For example, for 1 to 4 family, single family home, condos, and maybe mobile homes, those are considered residential. But when it comes to 5 units and up in multifamily, and those in bank's point of view or in real estate point of view, that's commercial. Do you guys view it the same way as everyone else, like banks and lenders?
So I was just going to say there's a slightly different policy that is issued. Typically with the residential, we would issue an Alta homeowners policy or some type of extended Alta homeowners policy, whereas to commercial properties, we can issue a CLTA policy a lot of the time. Yeah.
But to your question, Simon, as far as the property type, I think generally between title and the lender, they do view them the same. As escrow, we take our directive from the title report because it will say the type of property within the report itself, and then we will send that to the lender. The only time that I've seen a hiccup on that is if it's a single family residence that is in a planned unit development, also called a PUD, but there's no HOA, and sometimes that throws off the lender because they see the PUD and they're like, oh, there's an HOA. So sometimes that takes a little bit of clearing up to do. But other than that, it's pretty consistent between the title company and the lender with property type and being in conjunction on residential commercial.
Right. And it is interesting. There is a difference between, so like a residential would include a 1 to 4 unit apartment building, but anything 5 units and above then becomes commercial.
That's right.
So a different policy can then be issued.
I think escrow officers generally help us keep track of the timeline, also things that needs to be done, and also cut out the checks to those who needs to be paid to clear off the title. And I know I deal with a lot of foreign owners, foreign sellers, who might face some foreign capital gains tax and stuff. What do you do in those cases? Do they need to do anything, withhold, or they get the money? Would we be concerned that they run out of the country without paying their property tax?
So that is a concern of our government, right? And so we have the FIRPTA, which is in place. And so if you are a foreign investor, particularly if you're coming in as a buyer, the recommendation from me is if you're purchasing and you know eventually you're going to sell this, to work to get a tax ID number assigned. You may still have to pay the withholding to the IRS, and typically that's a 15% off the sale price that we pay to the IRS on the sale of the property if they are a foreign investor. But if when they're purchasing it, my recommendation would be to try to get a tax ID number to maybe help make that process a little bit easier at the time that they are selling the property.
And do you also work with 1031 exchanges, and how would that go about?
So a 1031 exchange is a tax deferred exchange. Typically it's on a second home or an investment property that you're doing a like kind exchange. So if you're going to sell and purchase another property, all of the money from the property, with a small exception, which I'll get to in a second, will go to the 1031 exchange company. So none of the money hits the owner's bank account. It all goes to the 1031 exchange, and the 1031 exchange would send the funds to escrow on their purchase side. So the property they're selling is the one they're relinquishing, and then the property that you're purchasing is the replacement. So unless they were to say, we want $50,000 taken out and the rest of the money is going to go through, and that would be called a boot. And then the funds are taxable for franchise tax board, we would have to do the withholding on those. But otherwise, it's a tax deferred exchange to kind of help them keep more of their money and not having to pay taxes.
And Jennifer, you said there's exception.
Yeah, that's the boot. Sorry, yeah, the boot would be the exception. So typically all the money goes to the 1031 exchange, but if the seller of the relinquished property, which is going to be the buyer on the replacement side, if they say, well, from the proceeds of the sale, we want to take $50,000 cash out for us, that doesn't go through the 1031 exchange, that's called a boot, and that's the exception, and then that would be taxable.
Got it.
Adrian, do you have any advice for people who are looking to purchase properties, regardless of residential or commercial? What do they need to do or watch out for during a transaction?
When you're looking to purchase property, I would definitely say consult with your lender and your realtor early. Be patient right now because property is limited, so there's not a whole lot of opportunity. I would say there's a lot of opportunity, but your choices are limited right now because there's not a lot of inventory, not a lot of properties for sale. As far as for sellers, I would say make sure you also are taking proactive steps. If you feel like there may be some issues, or even if you're considering selling, I would talk to your realtor and have your realtor pull a title report if you're considering selling. Get familiar with what's recorded on your property so that nothing comes as a surprise when you do actually get into escrow, right? I think it's always a good idea to maybe just check on your property once a year or so. Make sure there's nothing recorded on your property that's not supposed to be there. Something I mentioned earlier is that it's pretty easy to record stuff through the county recorder. And if it gets recorded mistakenly and gets applied to your property, that can cause an issue during your transaction. So just maybe, checking in every now and then and figuring out, okay, what's recorded against my property, what's going on the title. I don't think that's such a bad idea, right? And you can typically do that through talking with your realtor or even reach out to me directly. I would say, as far as when you're actually in a transaction, my biggest tip for people is get that statement of information in early. Get that in sooner rather than later, because too many times we get that towards the end of the transaction, and that's when we realize, oh my gosh, there's this lien or judgment that popped up, and now we have to resolve it, and we can't close on the scheduled date that we were wanting to close. So those would be probably my top tips.
How about you, Jennifer?
So for myself, for buyers, I would say be diligent and disciplined in your finances. It's a big purchase you're going to make, and that all of the money and the numbers really matter. So be disciplined with that. And for buyers and sellers, it matters who you work with. So if you're going to hire a realtor, if you're going to hire a lender, please do interviews of multiple people who you're really comfortable with, who's going to take the time to answer your questions. Over the years, I've had a lot of transactions where the agents and lenders were just clearly out of their territory of ability, and it really caused for some real heartache and delays and some real situations on both the buyer and seller side. So it really does matter who you work with. So don't feel like you have to go with the first person. Make sure you do the interview so that you ask all of your questions and feel really comfortable with who you're going to be working with, because it really will make the difference in the end.
Can you each tell me about one of your most rewarding or challenging cases that you helped resolve?
So for me, a lot of my memories of challenges that we overcome came from early on in the short sale days, which was back in I guess 2008 through 2014, and then even beyond a little bit, depending on the situation. But there were so many situations where we either couldn't find the lender, or we couldn't find the owner, or people were doing some kind of silly things in order to try to preserve their property. I'll give you one example of that. We had multiple issues of people adding someone to title who was not a real person. And then that fictitious person would declare bankruptcy, and that would hold the lender off from actually foreclosing on the property. Wow. That bankruptcy. But then when the owner went to sell that property, we had to figure out, well, what's going on with this fictitious person that's on title, and how do you get a fictitious person to sign off saying that, right? So that was a huge issue. We had to get over a lot of those hurdles. But it's really, when we find something, or when something comes up that truly doesn't apply to a homeowner, but for whatever reason all of the clues point in that direction, when we're finally able to resolve that and figure out get that issue out of the way so that homeowner can actually sell their property, that always feels great, right? Being able to help someone that's in a situation of distress and get out of that distress and be in a better spot, I couldn't ask for a better situation.
So for me, one that comes to mind are the sales that I've done over the years when there's a divorce situation for the sellers. It's a really unfortunate circumstance, but divorce does happen. And so you have, a husband and wife typically, and then they sometimes can be really at odds with each other, sometimes not even into each other, or not even wanting each other to know each other's email or phone number or anything. And even though it's really difficult through the transaction, once we are able to navigate everything and the disputes and get to the end and get on the same page with stuff, it's closing a chapter for them in their life and letting them kind of breathe a sigh of relief that they can move on, with the next chapter, of their life. And so that's one that comes to mind that does feel rewarding, even though it's an unfortunate circumstance.
One thing realtors were not supposed to tell is to give advice to buyers about how to hold titles. Adrian, can you help us explain what title ownership are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different ways to hold title, and I imagine that you're kind of alluding to when multiple people hold title, right? Because if you're just a single person, it's often just single person. Unless you own a trust or something like that. But so when it's two or more people, right? If we're talking about two people that want to own equal interests into the property and they're purchasing at the same time or coming into title at the same time, you would have two joint tenants, right? And a joint tenancy gives you what's called a right of survivorship. And right of survivorship basically means that if one of those owners passes away, that the ownership of that person that passed away is automatically transferred over to the surviving owner or the surviving joint tenant. There's another type of vesting called tenants in common, which doesn't offer that right of survivorship. So if you own, say, owner A and owner B own a property together as tenants in common, if one of those owners passes away, their ownership then has to go through what's called a probate process in order to determine who's going to be the owner of their interest in the property, right? So that's the big difference. There's also community property with right of survivorship, which is, again, it's typically a married couple or a domestic partnership, and that also offers you what's called right of survivorship. So that you don't have to go through probate if one of the owners passes away. So those are the primary three when it comes to multiple people being on title. You can also own as an entity, right? So if you own property in your revocable trust, or maybe your LLC or a corporation or something along those lines, you can own like that as well. And those are all subject to the rules and the guidelines of that corporation or of that trust, right? So, but each vesting type means something just, slightly different. So, does that kind of answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. We can't always advise, we can't ever advise exactly what you should hold your property, how you should hold your property, but we could always let you know what each of those vesting means.
And also, Adrian, whenever there's a change in ownership, meaning adding a name or taking someone off, would that trigger reassessment of property tax, whether it's a refinance situation or without refinance?
So that's a difficult question to answer specifically because I've seen them reassess taxes for seemingly no reason, right?
Right.
My understanding, though, is that it is as long as if you're adding someone to title, they may look at that and go, oh, that's a reason. But typically, if you're refinancing to do something like make improvements to your house, right, they're going to reassess your taxes. But anytime you make a change, you're subject to the possibility of the tax assessor reassessing your property. Typically, if it's an inter-family transfer and there's no money being transferred, I don't see a raise in property taxes. And that's difficult. It's a difficult question to answer because, again, property taxes, the county assessor often has a mind of their own, and it's difficult to tell what they're going to do.
Jen, you mentioned that many escrow officers only do residential or do commercial. And what makes them different in terms of the perspective of escrow and also the mobile home, the land? How are they different for what you need to do?
I think as far as what escrow officers, most of us learn on the job from other escrow people from the time we come in as assistants from the beginning. And sometimes I think it might just be as simple as experience in who you've worked with and where you came in. And then the relationships that you build. So if you build more with commercial realtors or residential realtors, because there's some crossover, that some agents just do residential or commercial. So even like escrow officers and agents, and some have a crossover and a blend and they do both and they know both. So I think sometimes it may just be your experience and exposure, or if you have a preference and you want to say, well, what if you learned residential and then you got a chance to work with commercial and you're like, well, I really love commercial. It's more interesting. Doing mobile homes, that's a whole different set of rules. And then doing business escrow is a whole different set of circumstances as far as who you reach out to, who you order stuff from, what that process looks like, and timelines and whatnot. And that one I took classes to learn that. I'm the only one in my company that does business. So there really isn't anyone to collaborate. So taking those classes and maybe having a couple people outside of my organization that knew them in case I need to, toss something out and buffer something just to say, hey, what are we doing? What am I doing here? Because I do need to just collaborate, on processes and what we're doing. Mobile homes, I called HCD, which is the Housing and Community Development, which kind of like the DMV for automobiles. HCD is the like for a mobile home when it's not affixed to the land. And so I've called HCD probably a few thousand times, and I still have to call them sometimes to ask them. But in my early days of learning mobile homes, I would call them and call them and call them to ask questions as I was, learning the process. And some of it's just, by trial and error. But I just wanted to learn that because I felt like I was passing up opportunities to have more business and do escrows by not knowing, the different sides.
Right. Jen, have you dealt with for sale by owner or cash transaction? They don't want to go through title insurance. They don't want to go through appraisal. And what do you tell them in that kind of situation?
So I have done several for sale by owners. Usually it's family to family, or if it's somebody who owns a home and they've had a tenant there for a long time, and then they end up selling to the tenant. So that's typically the for sale by owner. I only had one transaction where they didn't want title insurance, but these were investors that I've worked with have an established relationship with. That they wanted to take and record the grant deed themselves, but that's really not typical. Usually, especially if I didn't know the people and have an established relationship, say, yeah, we have to do title as part of this. But so that's a very, very unicorn situation. But yes, for sale by owners, typically through families. Sometimes it's parents have owned the home, are going to sell it to the kids. Sometimes they would give a gift equity, like a big credit towards the kids buying it so the kids can, so the sale price doesn't adversely affect comps in the neighborhood because we're still holding it at value, but they're crediting that equity in the home to the kids so that the kids can purchase the home at a more reasonable, purchase price for what they can afford.
Gift.
I was dabbling on the surface of when I was looking for land in, let's say, in the high desert area. Sometimes we care about the use, whether if it's agricultural, residential, industrial, manufacturing, zoning, that will affect the value of the property a lot. And I recently learned that, sometimes people were putting mobile homes or manufactured homes on lot. The difference between like mobile home and on a permanent foundation, 433A, will be very, very different for a lender. Sometimes if it's set on permanent foundation, then the lender can qualify and things like that. When we do residential, we do a home inspection, and commercial, there's the phase 1, phase 2 differences. And I get confused with all these terminology and things that we need to do a lot. Do you also help push along the way? Like, oh yeah, you need to have this done, or that's a job of the realtor that they need to be proficient themselves?
So if I were to get an escrow that had a mobile home that wasn't on a 433, meaning that it was affixed to the land, it's then technically considered personal property. And usually by the time that I've gotten the offer in, they usually have a lender already set. But if that's the case where there's a mobile home, there's just a handful of lenders in the United States that do loans on those. And they only go back so far. I don't remember, I'm sorry, what year it is that the cutoff is, because that's more the lender rules. Like if it's like pre-1972 or whatever the year is, that they wouldn't loan on those because they're too old. But yeah, you can do it on land. If it's on land, I think that occasionally if they're getting a loan for the land, that there's maybe a few other lenders that you can branch out to. A lot of the mobile homes, if they're in the park, typically are cash buyers. And a lot of these parks are usually 55 plus in age. So you're looking a little bit more at retirement, pre-retirement communities. So a lot of those are cash. And on a mobile home in a park, there's no title insurance that's done on those because, again, it's property. So there's nothing to insure because there's no land transferring as part of that deal.
I see.
Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yes. I mean, just with this little short short sentence, it already shows how knowledgeable you are. Adrian is a huge asset to Realtor members because a lot of times we are looking for farms, we are looking for leads, we are looking for owners who have tenants out there, non-occupant owners, or distressed properties. If you have pre-foreclosure, things like that, they can be a great resources to realtors. So not just for buyers who are looking to buy a property, actually realtors, you could be Adrian's client and you could be Adrian's partner.
Absolutely.
Likewise. And Jennifer gives is also a big asset for lenders because she's on top of her game and then she responds very quickly. I forgot when we opened the escrow, Jennifer, was it Christmas day before or before New Year? I forgot. It was a Friday afternoon around 2 o'clock. And I told her, hey, don't worry about it. Let's do it next week. And she goes, no. Give me the address, send over the email. We're going to get it started. We're going to put things together. And it got, started. The escrow got open smoothly and, we are ahead of the game. Yeah.
Sounds like there's a team playing going on.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. And that's Definitely. What we love, the camaraderie among us, the power team of real estate. So if you are looking to buy real estate, you are not just looking for one agent or one escrow company, not one lender, not one title insurance. It's a combination, a whole package. When everything is geared up and oiling, running smoothly, that's what's guaranteeing your smooth transaction.
Right now, we know so much about you. How do we contact you, Adrian? What's the best way? If someone wants to refer to you or work with you, what is the best way to contact you?
Absolutely. So I've got a website. You can always go to my website. It's www.adriancrandall.com. And all of my social media links, my phone number, my contact information, you can even click on a link to schedule a meeting with me there. So feel free to go to my website or call me at 714-767-4493.
Same thing for you, Jen. How do we contact you?
So I'm on my emails all day, every day for work. So usually email is a great way to contact me. That's Jennifer@cornerescrow.com. My direct phone number is 951-239-3019. You can go to the cornerescrow.com website and look for the Murrieta branch, and all of our contact information additionally would be located on our website.
She's not only limited to Murrieta. So just want to let you know, anywhere throughout California, you name it, you can call her.
Yes. Thank you.
Tom, any news on the CRE lately? Commercial real estate?
Yes, I do have a listing coming up in Irvine between Lake Forest and Laguna Niguel and Irvine. It's on the corner. It's about 3,300 square foot warehouse flex space with one showroom and 2 offices and the storage. The ceiling is 22 feet high. It's very, very good if you have opening up a warehouse logistics, or it's even also good for martial arts schools, dance schools, Class A location, premium. It is for sale for $2.32 million, and it would be able to qualify for SBA loan if you're planning to purchase it for yourself, or it's able for a lease for $6,700 per month. It's a great deal. Let me know if you're interested.
Excellent. And on my side, on the lending side, we do all commercial loans, commercial real estate loans, as well as SBA, so we can help your prospective buyer. We have a new program coming. We have unsecured loan available up from $50,000 up to $500,000 coming up. So I will share with you guys more on the next episode.
Oh, I would love to learn more about the unsecured part.
Yep. Well, thank you both for coming to CRE and More, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.